Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about decimal place value. So I have my place value chart here, and it looks kind of funny because I've got everything covered up with magnets, just so we can go through and reveal the place value place by place, just to kind of re-jog our memory from what we talked about at the beginning of the year. So we have 7 different lines in front of my decimal, and then we have 3 different lines behind the decimal. The lines that are behind the decimal, that's going to be our decimal number. It's going to represent a fractional piece. The lines that are in front of my whole number, or in front of my decimal, are going to represent my whole number. Those are going to be my whole values. So we're going to start all the way out here, and we're going to work our way back in. So hopefully you become more familiar with these. So starting way out here, we have our millions place. So this place here would represent 1 million. Then, working our way in, we have 100,000, so our 100,000s place. Then we have our 10,000s place, so there's 10,000s. And we have our thousands place finally. Continuing to work our way in, we have our hundreds place there. Then we have our tens and our ones place. So those represent our whole number values again, and I'll move you a little bit closer just so you can see those places there. Now we are ready to move over to these values behind the decimal. So I'm going to go ahead, and I will have to tear the rest of those papers. So right here, this value right here, it is going to be our tenths place. So that first place there is our tenths. Then we have our hundredths place. And last but not least, we have our thousandths place. So we have revealed all of the different places. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and quickly write in a number above each of those. And I'm just going to do it in black. That way you guys can see it. So I just used regular numbers and went all the way through, so that way we can talk about the values of each of these numbers. And as we've talked about before, value is different than place. Value would be the worth of the number, so how much it would actually be worth. So starting again with the millions, the 1 would be worth 1 million. So that would look like that, a 1 with 6 zeros. Then we have our 2, which is in the 100,000s place. So it would look like 200,000. It would be 2 with 5 zeros on it. Then we have our 3. Our 3 is in our 10,000 spot. So it would look like that, 30,000. Then we have our 4. Our 4 is just in the thousand spot. So we would have 4,000 to represent the value there. Notice that every time what's happening to our zeros, every time we go down, we are losing a 0. So then we have our 5 in the hundreds. That would represent 500. We have our 6 in the tens. That's going to represent 60. And then we have our ones place, and that is going to just represent 7, that ones. Then moving into our decimal place value here, this is where we have our decimal values or our fractional amounts. So we have 8 tenths, which can be written as a decimal, 0.8, or as a fraction, 8 over 10. We have our 9 in the hundredths place. So that can be written as 0 and 900ths, or 9 over 100. And I know it's hard to see. I'll bring you guys closer in just a second. And then we have our 1,000th so we can write it again as a decimal or as a fraction. So I'll start you guys up here at the millions and take you down so you can see the different values there. So along with place value, we've also talked about ways to write a decimal. We have standard form, word form, and expanded form, which you can see I've written down here on the bottom part of my anchor chart. So I have my standard form written there, and if you will, go ahead and say the number. 472 and 368 thousandths. We have to remember that that decimal point represents and, or that's how it's stated. That's how it's said. So I need to go ahead and write this number in word form. And when I write it in word form, I'm going to write it just as I just said it. So I'm going to start with 400, and I'm going to make sure everything's written out in words. I'm not going to include numbers. So, well, let me rephrase that. I am going to include numbers, but they're going to be written as words. So I would start off as 400. That was the first part that I said. 400. I've got 72 next. So I've got to write out 72. Then I have my decimal so that I know that that's going to be an and. And 300. Then I've got 68. And last but not least, I have to end it by saying what place the 8 is in. In this number here, the 8 is in the thousandths place. So I would have to end it with the word thousandths. And I am going to want to make sure that I include that THS there on the end, because that's going to be the difference between the thousandths and the thousands place. Then, last but not least, we have our expanded form. And you guys are used to an expanded form that would look something like this. But this year in 5th grade, we talked about a 5th grade expanded form using some multiplication and addition. So we're going to take the time now to write that out. And in order to do that, I've got to realize what the values are. So I have to know that this 4 here is the same thing as 400, or that's what it represents. So I've got 400 here, 70 there. My 2 is just going to represent 2. Then I've got 3/10, 600ths, and 8 thousandths. So I'm going to use that in order to help me write my expanded form. So I'm going to start with my 400. I know that I have to multiply the 4 by the place, which is the hundreds. So I'm going to start with 4 times 100. Then I'll include my addition sign. I've got to go to my 7, so 7's in the tens place, so 7 times 10. 7 times 10 plus 2, well 2's in the ones place, so 2 times 1. 2 times 1 plus 3 is in the tenths place. 2 ways you can write it. You can write it with the decimal or with the fraction. I'm going to choose to write it with the fraction. So 3 times 1/10 plus 6 is in the hundredths place. So again, I'm going to choose to write it with a fraction. 6 times 1/100th plus, messed that one up. That should be a plus sign there. I'll write it up above it. Plus, we have our 8, which is in the thousands place. So 8 times 1/1000th. And again, sometimes you may see these in parentheses, each of the multiplications in parentheses, and sometimes you may not. So it's important that you're able to identify both. Okay? Any questions on those? Alright? Make sure that if you do have questions that you see your teacher either after your live lesson or during office hours so that way you can ask.